It started with a video. A shaky phone camera, breathless laughter spiking the audio, and me, standing in the dining room of my parents' flat in Chambery, holding a marker and pointing at an unevenly drawn diagram on the wall. I was 23, just home from university, thick glasses slipping down my nose, explaining the concept of an engineered microbe that could scan contaminated water, report pathogens in real time and clean it, part biotech, part AI. My cousin Clara filmed it, zooming on my hands, clutching the marker as my brother David chimed in with a sarcastic, para-Hollywood Hermano. The video took on its own life. Within hours of it appearing on WhatsApp, then Twitter, my hunched posture, the hastily scribbled DNA helix, my mother in the background shaking her head, people from the building, relatives I hadn't seen in years, classmates from school I'd barely spoken to, all found a reason to watch and comment. Loser, fantasist, loco de laboratorio, the Gene DJ became the punchline at every gathering for a full summer that felt longer than any Madrid heat wave. Madrid changes in July, the days going on until you feel adrift in amber. That year, I barely left my room. My sister Laura's friend Andrea came by to drop off dresses, pausing at my door and giving me a sad, unreadable look, as if I were contagious. My family, mortified, pleaded for silence. "Let it pass, Hugo, don't embarrass us more," my mother said, her voice flat. The video amassed over 10,000 views in a week. I stopped counting the memes. Silence thickened between me and everyone who mattered. But underneath it sat something denser, resolve, a thing so heavy yet quiet I almost feared it. If ridicule has a texture, it's the stifled air of early morning when the city hasn't awoken, when each footstep away from your childhood home sounds irrevocable. In September, I packed a battered suitcase and called a taxi at dawn. My mother pretended to sleep, David played video games with his door open, volume loud. The living room was empty. No one got up to say goodbye and no one asked for a forwarding address. The silence as the taxi pulled away stayed with me longer than any jeer. I moved to a tiny shared flat outside Zurich. It was an unglamorous place, ovenless kitchen, shared shower. I cleaned floors at the gym near the ETH Zurich campus to make rent. Some days my hands bled raw from cleaning supplies. But the research lab was open late, and my advisor, Dr. Narayan, British Indian tolerant of misfits, was too busy to care about my faded jeans or nervous stammer. He let me stay late after official hours, nodded when I requested to run odd simulations on the neural net-equipped bacteria I was coding and cultivating. Science, unlike people, offered silence by default. Failure is private. Nights in the lab, the gentle hum of the fridge, the scent of agar and isopropanol, the thermal cycler's beep for each trial. Those moments I built my world back cell by cell. I never explained why I was always first in and last out. No one needed to know about Madrid, about the viral humiliation, about the burning in my gut that didn't let me sleep. Progress came slowly. Sometimes it felt like nothing changed for months. My coding was clumsy, the bacteria mutated in unforeseen ways, rejecting the genetic sequences I tried to graft. My stipend barely covered groceries, so I skipped meals, filling up on instant noodles, spending everything else on cloud compute time. I left messages in journals, old Moleskine notebooks, just to keep company with my thoughts. Failure became daily, sometimes hourly, but time in a lab is elastic. You don't notice yourself getting better. One spring morning, 2 years in, I stumbled into an iteration where a colony flashed green under UV, responding to E. coli in water, barely perceptible but real. I sat on the chilled lab floor for an hour, notebook open on my knees, not quite believing I'd made something that worked. I presented it at an internal seminar. People took notice, then shrugged. Students have lucky days. My paper was rejected twice, third time accepted in a mid-level journal. Still, Narayan nodded, told me to keep improving. I did. 3 years became 5. My Spanish accent faded into something peculiar, halfway between Madrid backstreets and Zurich's clipped orders. Email exchanges replaced family dinners. My father sent a message once in a blue moon, "No tea preoccups Hijo. Life is hard." I kept going. The 5th year brought 2 breakthroughs. One, a synthetic pathway that gave my microbe both an AI-driven sense to detect and classify contaminants and the ability to survive in non-sterile field conditions. 2, an invitation to the World Biotech Forum in Geneva, sponsored by a little-known startup eager for new water solutions. They paid for my first suit. On the train to Geneva, watching fields blur behind the window, I rehearsed what to say. Stories are seldom about data, they're about survival, about seeing something nobody else does. In Geneva, I walked past clean fountains into halls lined with banners and camera crews. I barely slept, hands shaking as I demoed the process for skeptical investors, but something resonated: a synthetic microbe with brains built from neural networks and a stomach that felt for dirt and poison. Not in theory, in practice, as I showed green and red flashes on my laptop, and then in water from Lake Geneva, deliberately contaminated for on-site testing. A string of emails, then phone calls. Months passed. Suddenly my life didn't feel so brittle anymore. In 2020, the startup signed me as project director. I had a team: coders, biologists, field engineers, each sharper than the last. Investors came, grants followed. Money stopped mattering, my hands stopped trembling. In the evenings, if I closed my eyes, I heard Madrid, but in new colors, less hostile. A lifetime's silence began to thaw. In the spring of 2022, our field units, bacterial sensors sealed in plastic canisters, were deployed for the first time along the Segura River in Murcia. The monitors read out on a simple screen: safe, risky, unsafe. For communities tiled along that river, it meant their water was suddenly a little less dangerous. Soon, I couldn't hide success any longer. Industry magazines published features. I spoke at conferences not as an imposter but as someone with proof in hand. My name, no longer a joke, became staple in the circles that had ridiculed my kind once. Sometimes, after interviews or late dinners, I'd look at my own hands and feel an ache, loss mixed with joy, because neither ever leaves for good, but returning home haunted me. I hadn't been back to Madrid, not really, since that morning with the packed suitcase. My father grew old in WhatsApp photos, my mother sent occasional links. Look, the neighbor's son got promoted. I nodded along, replied politely. The change in tone came after a Spanish newspaper published a piece, front page, Sunday insert, about the mad scientist from Madrid returning AI to the world of water. Reporters dug for the viral video, embedded it with the headline. From meme to miracle, my phone lit up calls from family, then neighbors, then old friends turned strangers. The silence was broken, but the ache only grew sharper. Guilt, relief, gratitude, all tangled. In April 2023, during Semana Santa, my father invited me back. Come home, Hijo, people want to see you. The note was simple, but the old tone of unspoken challenge curled underneath it. Was it pride or apology? Both, maybe. The Madrid I returned to smelled of spring, orange blossoms, frying churros, sun beating off brick and stone. The city had aged, as had we all. Cal de Fuencarral was narrower than in my memory. Bookstores had been replaced by gadget shops. I stepped off the train, suitcase in hand, and found Clara waiting. Her hair was shorter, her laugh more subdued. She hugged me. The gesture felt both intimate and strange. My parents' apartment hummed with preparation for my return: pots on the stove, bottles of wine lined up, extra chairs. My father's handshake was firmer than expected. My mother's eyes lingered too long on my face. David had grown a close-cut beard, as if to armor himself from the past. That afternoon, the family gathered: aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors from all floors, everyone who'd watched that video and carried it through 1,000 jokes and retellings. Skepticism hung in the air, all polite grins and raised brows. After requisite handshakes and kisses, my father led me into the dining room. The old wall, once stained with my marker diagrams, was freshly painted. He motioned me to the head of the table. "Show them, Hugo," he said, and his voice was softer than I remembered. I placed my project's field device, a small transparent canister stacked with microbe-embedded strips and a LED readout, on the table. The silence was immediate. For the first time since my adolescence, nobody interrupted. I poured a glass of tap water, then added a vial of E. coli, standard demonstration procedure. I switched on the device. The microbe's genetic circuit awakened, sensors pulsed, a faint chemical scent mixing with old cigarette smoke from the hallway. Over the next 60 seconds, the device flashed, monitor screens switched from green to red. Unsafe, it read first in English, then after a tap, peligroso. I poured another glass, this time with filtered water. Green flashed, safe/seguro. Clara leaned in, eyes wide. David blinked, his mouth opening then shutting. An uncle holding a beer murmured, "Esto no puede ser real." I unscrewed the shell, showed the microbial insert, a thin membrane faintly glowing. "This is the real thing," I said softly. "It works now. We use them on rivers, at refugee camps. Kids who used to get sick from river water don't because of this." A long silence. Only the street noise outside filled the room, horns, music, Madrid as it ever was. My mother's hands shook as she traced the canister. You did it, Hugo. I did, Mama. My team and I, we did it. An uncle ventured a joke, still not for Hollywood, eh? But his voice faltered, drowned in the reality of what they saw. My father steadied himself, face bathed in light from the apartment's only window. He touched my shoulder. We were wrong, he said, his voice almost inaudible. I was wrong. I looked around the table, faces lined by age, skepticism bleeding into something gentler. Clara wiped a tear away without hiding it. Even David, once my greatest doubter, nodded slightly, a half apology lingering in the movement. I took a breath. Years of silence and desperate resolve settled inside me, no longer a stone but earth. My heart softened, the city outside bustled, its noise familiar instead of hostile. The old wounds, I realized, would never close completely, nor did they need to. I stayed a week, moving through Madrid with new eyes. Neighbors who'd mocked me now stopped me on the stairs to ask how the device worked, if their kids could study something useful like biotech, or if they'd missed the line between magic and persistence. Around the kitchen table, now crowded, stories came easier. My mother spoke of my childhood, how I tore apart radios to glimpse their secrets. My father confessed he'd rewatched the old video hundreds of times, heart heavy with regret. Clara apologized for filming it, David for what he'd said. I shrugged, we were all children once. The night before I left, I walked through the city alone, past old haunts and hidden corners. The orange trees were blooming, scent thick as memory. At Puerta del Sol, I sat on a stone bench watching crowds churn, laughter and shouts echoing upward. In those hours, I realized that home was never lost, only waiting. Madrid had mocked me, so had my family, the ones who mattered most. Yet their disbelief was the crucible that forged the silence inside me into resolve. We do not always choose our path, but we choose to keep walking, no matter how many times we stumble or how loud the world laughs. I left Madrid at sunrise, suitcase lighter, heart heavier with love and forgiveness than I'd thought possible. At the airport, my family gathered for the first time in years, and there was only the gentle, almost silent exchange of pride, apology, and hope. My father pressed the field device into my hands before I boarded. For your next river, he said, and I smiled, truly smiled, knowing now that belief is a thing you build in silence until the world is forced to see it, alive in your hands.